Hello, I'm Christina Brown, and this is Our Take on Arise TV, a talk show focused on the topics and stories related and of interest to women. And back today as my guest co-host is Eunice Omole. You might remember Eunice. She joined us here on our debut week of Our Take. Thank you so much for coming back. Eunice Omole was actually a first runner-up on the show Apprentice Africa. You have a background in real estate and in finance, doing a little bit of everything. And now she is a contributing writer for the online magazine Applause Africa. Plus, she works with nonprofit organizations that help prepare women for the workplace. Thank you so much, Eunice, for coming back. I truly appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here. This is exciting.
And you, like I said, you were on the show Apprentice Africa, and for so many of the viewers who are here based in the U.S., we're all familiar with the NBC program Apprentice. And of course, I'm assuming the Africa edition is modeled the same way.
The same exact format. I mean, we had contestants all over the diaspora, from the U.S., UK, as well as those on the continent, from Uganda, Kenya, Ghana, Nigeria, of course. So it was exactly the same. It was a really great run, and yeah.
And you came close. Very close.
I mean, it could have gone either way. I was, one of two finalists, obviously. So it was really great to be in that position, be in that role. But ultimately, I didn't win. But I left feeling like I won.
And you've really been able to make a lot out of the exposure that you got from appearing on the show. And I know one of the areas that are of real significant interest to you is empowering women for the workforce.
Absolutely.
Talk a little bit about your work, particularly with the Dress for Success program.
Yes, I mean, I just started as a recent initiative that I took, just really giving back to the community. I mean, there's no better feeling than having to wear something that you feel so confident in. It definitely changes your mindset, changes your attitude, and thus ultimately changing how you perform in the workplace, how you perform on interviews, and how you present yourself, period, to your friends, to your world. Yeah. So for me, it's a really great experience having to share my experiences to, number of different women, not only in New York City, but all across the country. So. And
I'm really glad that you brought up that important point about making women feel empowered and comfortable as they enter, or in some cases, re-enter the workforce. One of the areas that we're actually going to be focusing on today's episode is actually part of a 3-part series. It's called Women in the Digital World.
Wonderful.
And we're going to be talking to 3 pioneers, particularly in the tech industry, that are doing all they can to get more women, but specifically women of color involved in the tech industry, and I'm sure that you'll have some really good insights and thoughts about that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, well, we've got a lot to talk about today. Let us first start off with our daily take stories, a look at the news and views headlines. First of all, President Obama did wrap up his visit to Africa with another president. This one, George W. Bush and former First Lady Laura Bush were in Tanzania for a women's conference where First Lady Michelle Obama spoke at the summit of the Wives of African Leaders. It's actually part of a 2-day women's conference. You see former First Lady Laura Bush now. The former First Ladies, as well as, I mentioned, First Lady Michelle Obama, all spoke of their role as well as influence that they have as First Ladies. But they used that opportunity to urge the First Ladies of Africa to use their position to usher in change for their people. The First Ladies also both commiserated about how difficult it can be to speak about substantive issues, especially when most people are focused on their wardrobe and hair. This is actually the last stop in Tanzania, followed by the Obama's trip to Senegal and South Africa. And it sounds cute, right? It sounds kind of cute to talk about the fact, yes, when it comes to Michelle Obama, there's probably more attention given to her bangs than some of the issues that are important to her. But they do raise a very, very good point. And it also kind of speaks to your work as well, in terms of the amount of tension that is put on women when it comes to their appearance. Sometimes it gets lost when it comes to the message.
It's all about your image, to be quite honest. And I mean, it affects how women can even be promoted in the workplace. It affects how people are even perceived on the street. It affects how people even, decide whether or not they even want to deal with you, sell you a house or sell you, anything. But yeah, I mean, there's such importance on how you present yourself to the world that it just matters. And that's why Dress for Success is so important to me, because I feel like so many women get it, but they don't. I mean, it's so important for you to have in the back of your mind that the moment you leave your house, again, you don't have a second chance at a first impression. It means a lot. So I commend Michelle Obama and also Laura Bush for being out there on the continent and, you know, really raising a lot of the issues, the causes
the
on
awareness
the continent.
and also the platform and influence of the role that First Ladies have. Now, I understand that your family is originally from Nigeria, and correct me if I'm wrong, you have visited Nigeria on more than a few occasions.
Yeah,
okay.
like I've worked, lived in Nigeria. I mean, just the fact that they are making Africa a priority is just exciting for me, especially now that Obama has decided to take this initiative to power Africa. I mean, we're now seeing an initiative across sub-Saharan Africa to have electricity. I mean, having it go in and out, I mean, it just
it's
causes
something that we would take for granted here in the U.S., but the reality is it is so important and so crucial.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, a lot more stories to discuss, Eunice. This one, unfortunately, not necessarily a pleasant sight. This is out of Egypt, where Egyptians there continue to line the streets in front of the presidential palace in Cairo. Egypt's powerful armed forces issued a virtual ultimatum to Islamist President Mohamed Morsi on Monday, calling on the nation's feuding politicians to agree on an inclusive roadmap for the country's future within 48 hours. Anti-Morsi demonstrators gathered in Tahrir Square to continue their protests by waving flags and chanting. Now, the main opposition, National Salvation Front, which has demanded a national unity government for months, applauded the military's position. That's a very tricky and dicey situation indeed. President Morsi, of course, being one of the first elected official in Egypt. Now his ouster being called for by these images, thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people.
Yeah, he's literally fighting for legitimacy right now with his own people. I mean, it's been about a year now, and unfortunately, he's basically found himself to be in a really isolated position. You have ministers that are just resigning left and right. You have the people, the opposition demands. I mean, these are just basic demands. I mean, we're talking about electricity. Right now, it's just going in and out. We're talking about rising fuel prices, rising food prices.
And we're also seeing these images play out in a number of different places, whether we're talking about Syria, whether we're talking about Turkey, or if we're talking about even the unrest in Brazil.
Yeah.
We're seeing the so-called little guy, right, take to the streets and demand more from its government, or in this case, the ousting of its presidential leader.
Yeah, it's actually unnerving seeing how across all these different regions, this unrest and people are just demanding their basic rights, to be quite honest. I mean, what's going on right now in Egypt it's really disheartening. I know Obama, made a phone call to Morsi to really address those demands. I mean, these are basic demands. They've been through a lot within the last year.
Whether or not they get met will certainly be the next question, and whether or not the question of military rule is necessarily the best next position, I think remains to be seen. A little closer to home, though, Arise TV and Our Take has continuing coverage of the killing of Trayvon Martin, the George Zimmerman trial. It is now day 2 of week 2 of testimony, and the judge today agreed to strike the testimony of the lead investigator who, under questioning, thought that Zimmerman's account of his fight with Trayvon Martin was credible. But Judge Deborah Nelson believes the jury should decide if Zimmerman's recounting is credible. We are certainly seeing this trial move at what seems to be a very steady, I won't quite say rapid, but steady pace. It seems like Deborah Nelson is keeping everything on point. We know last week we heard from 15 witnesses. It seemed like, as one person put it, the human side of the testimony is what was heard last week. This week, however, we're hearing more from the scientists. We're hearing more from the people who are analyzing the crime scene or analyzing the 911 tapes. I'm curious as to what your thoughts have been since this trial has started.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, it hasn't been going at a rapid pace, but definitely I see, the development as the case really just pans itself out. And there are just a couple things out of the testimony, and especially Zimmerman's narrative about his account of what happened that night.
They don't line up with the pictures.
It doesn't. I mean, it's very inconsistent. I mean, the fact that he said that he got out of his car to jot down the street sign, it's like, really, you're the neighborhood captain. You need to get out your car to, pass that information on to authorities. So a lot of the things that he said in his narrative and versus what actually happened that was recorded by the police is just really inconsistent. So I definitely am interested and plan to continue to keep posted on this.
Yes, this is certainly not a trial that seems to be wrapping up anytime soon, at least not in the next day or so. Well, this story, I'm sure, Eunice, will pique your interest, as it will for millions of students across the nation. Paying for college just got more expensive for many, many students. And that is because the interest rates on certain student loans doubled thanks to inaction, shocking, by Congress. The rate on subsidized government loans jumped from 3.4% to 6.8%. Now, this is important. The increase does not apply to existing loans, only to the new ones, but that's affecting about 7.5 million borrowers. Now, we will have to wait and see if Congress passes retroactive legislation when they return from the July 4th break. And I heard you say once, Eunice, that you and Sally Mae were best friends.
Oh, in fact, just yesterday, when I got the news that this hike was going to happen, I immediately called them to find out, does this affect my loans? I mean, you have millions of students who are grappling with student loans already, and then for the government to, automatically add this increase, literally doubling it, you're sending millions of, would-be students out of school.
And I think part of the reason why it stings that much more is the fact that this is due to congressional inaction. The fact that this is something.
This may just be subjected to some Republican filibuster in July. I think it's due. I think it's
July 10th.
Yeah. So next week we're going to hear the latest. So hopefully we can, get it together and just, help the country through this process.
Because we have some interest rates to deal with. All
Yes.
right. Well, thank you so much, Eunice, for joining me here for the Daily Take. Great
you.
job. And we are on Facebook and Twitter. You can, of course, follow us on Twitter by simply going to @OurTake, Arise TV. But you can also like and leave comments on our Facebook page by heading to Our Take on Arise TV. And I'm Christina Brown, and you are watching Our Take.